Good afternoon, everybody. It's going to be our Summary Markets episode 145. As always, we're going to talk about the weekly calendar. Then we're going to get into ES, NASDAQ, Bitcoin, Ethereum. We're going to move on to talking about the dollar and euro correlations, and we're going to close it up with oil as well. Before we get started, make sure to check out the Black Friday sale going on for the OTG and for Apex. Both of those links will be in the description below. It's the first and second link. We have 70% off basically everything on our website at OTG and 80% off on Apex. So definitely check those out. Getting started with the calendar here, it's a pretty busy week because we have the first week of the month going into December, and we have the close of the month for November. So starting with Monday, there's nothing major data-wise, but we do have a lot of speeches going on. We have an ECB speech at 9 a.m. Then we have a couple of Fed talks throughout the day around 12. Going into Tuesday, once again, not a whole lot of data, but we do have the consumer confidence coming out at 10 a.m. So you definitely want to keep an eye on that. All the other stuff coming out on Tuesday is pretty small, and it shouldn't affect the market too much. Moving on to Wednesday, once again, we got a lot of data coming out. We have the flash estimate year over year for the euro, CPI flash estimate as well. Both of those are going to be at 5 a.m. We have a couple of bond auctions for the euro as well. I believe it's actually, in Germany. And then we have the ADP non-farm employment change at 8 a.m. with the GDP quarter to quarter coming out at 8:30. I think I said GDP, I meant ADP, excuse me, on that 8:15 one. But GDP quarter to quarter on 8:30. And then we have the GDP price index coming out at 8:30 as well. All of those will be decently high impact. Moving on to 9:45, we have the Chicago PMI. You want to watch out for that. And then at 10 o'clock, we have JOLTS, job openings, and pending home sales. Both of these should be pretty high impact. The pending home sales you definitely want to watch out for, because if you guys remember last month, we had the biggest drop in mortgage rates we've seen in, I believe, 20 to 30 years. The mortgage rates are still very, very high, but we saw a massive drop in the last month. So anybody that was kind of on the fence, they were looking to buy, but the rates were kind of scaring them a little bit, that might have been enough of a boost to kind of push them to buy that property. So pending home sales should probably be a pretty hot number here. So definitely keep an eye on that one. We also have crude oil inventories coming out at 10:30 as always, because it is a Wednesday. Fed talk at 12:30, and then a big Fed talk at 1:30. Jerome Powell is going to be speaking at 1:30 about inflation and whatnot. So definitely listen out for that one. Moving on to Thursday here. We have a ton of stuff on Thursday, but the majority of it is pretty low impact. But all of it combined should be a decent move for the euro. So definitely keep an eye on the euro on Thursday. And then at 8:30, for the dollar, you want to keep an eye on the PCE. This is going to be a huge data print because the last PCE actually showed a potential top forming. So this could confirm that the inflation might be topping out finally. So if we look at this graph here, let's zoom in a little bit. We can see that the last rating kind of topped out, and it topped out if you look back in July and May 2021. We are not seeing a PCE get above this 0.6 to 0.7 rating. So if this could continue to fall, possibly down to 0.4, 0.3, they are looking for a 0.3 rating. That would be a huge data print. So definitely keep an eye on that one. That will be probably one of the biggest events this entire week. Moving on to 10 a.m. on Thursday, we have another PMI data print. So PMI coming out at 10 a.m. So watch out for that. And then a couple of small numbers throughout the day with some Fed talks. Watch out for the ECB speech at 9:40 p.m. So that will be the post-market going into the London Open for Friday. Finally, on Friday, we have average hourly earnings at 8:30 in the morning, non-farm employment change at 8:30, as well as unemployment rate. Those are all going to be high-impact data prints for the dollar and possibly the euro. So definitely keep an eye on that. Okay, sorry. I know that was a lot. We do got a busy week coming up. So I wanted to cover all of those prints that you guys need to be watching. All right, moving on to ES here. We're going to start off by looking at last week's profile, see kind of how we closed with all that holiday action and that Fed minutes on Wednesday. So looking at the profile, it is actually slightly bullish with this strong POC node on the high, and you closed decently towards the high with a small pullback on Friday, most likely just due to the holiday. But closing with that POC node around 4,032 is pretty bullish as long as we can hold on to that going into next week. And then we have a support node around 4,008. The couple of levels you want to watch below are these levels right here. We kind of have an LVN right here, an LVN right here, and then we have the value area low down around 39.65. So if we do start to sell off, those would be the major supports. So we're going to go ahead and mark out this POC node right here. We're going to mark out the weekly POC node. Make sure we dash that so we know what we're looking at here. And we're going to go ahead and label this the weekly POC. Then we're going to mark out the value area high right here. Let's just go into the settings and say weekly value area high. And we're going to make that red as well. And then finally, we're going to mark out the value area low right here. So weekly value area low, and we are good to go. So if you want to keep the weekly profile on there, you can, but we're just going to go ahead and get rid of this so it doesn't clog up our chart. But these are all the main levels from last week's profile you want to keep an eye on. One more level that we missed, if you do want to mark out that LVN right there, you can do so. All right, let's go ahead and get rid of that profile. And let's pull up our individual profiles. So you have to watch out for the individual profiles because we did have a holiday last week. Thursday and Friday were basically holidays. Then we had the Wednesday FOMC. So the profiles are going to look a little weird. But for the most part, what we are looking at is if we do break above this 4,038 weekly value area high, we have this old, I think it's a fair value gap. Let's go ahead and zoom out and see where that's coming from. Yeah, that's a fair value gap. So if we do start to break above this value area high, above 48, we want to look for a possible fill-in of this fair value gap. Obviously, that is a massive zone if you are scalping. It's more of a swing trading target, but that would be from 4,066 all the way up to 41.27. So about 40 to 50 points on that level. When you do get inside that zone, you can look for some smaller levels, maybe some tail end balances, maybe some initial balance extensions, whatever. But just on a swing trading perspective, that is the entire area that we want to fill in going into next week. Now, obviously, that's going to be determined by a lot of those Fed prints, a lot of those data prints, I mean. So we can't be purely technical, but that would be the target zone. Okay, going down here, if we do start to hold below that POC below 40.31, you possibly want to look for the retrace into that little POC node down around 4,008, possibly a 4,000 retrace down to that LVN as well. If it gets extremely bearish, which could happen because we have so many data prints, you want to look for that little LVN slash kind of single print zone from Tuesday around 39.90. And if that is lost, you are looking for a full value retrace of last week down into 39.65. Okay. All right, moving on to NASDAQ here. Let's get rid of some of our older levels. And then let's get rid of our intraday profiles and pull up our weekly profile here. So same thing with NASDAQ. We're going to keep an eye on this value area high right here. We're going to keep an eye on the value area low, the POC. And do we have any major LVNs? We do have a little LVN zone kind of right here that we want to watch out for. And then possibly the weekly high. Let's go ahead and mark that out as well. Okay, so we have all of our levels. We can go ahead and delete that profile. We're just going to hide it for now. Pull up the individual profiles. And we can basically say that if we hold below this value area high of last week, possibly around 790, you are looking for that LVN retrace down to 720. That would also be the POC of Tuesday, possibly supporting the price on the way down. If you do lose that level, there's not a whole lot of support until you get down into the 600s, possibly the high 500s as well. If you look for a full value retrace of last week, you're going down to 530. NASDAQ had a much weaker Friday than ES did. NASDAQ basically just sold off the entire day. If we do start holding back above the 800 level, back above last week's value area high, you are looking for a retrace of that Friday price action. And you can basically think of the price action on Thursday and Friday as kind of a pre-market price action, where that value is not insanely strong because it's basically a holiday. There's not a whole lot of volume there. There's not a whole lot of value. That price action can be very easily retraced. Okay, so think of that price action the same way you would think of like an overnight session. Okay, so seeing that sell off on Friday on NASDAQ, it's not the worst because we could easily retrace that back into the low 900s to possibly 12,000 level. Okay. All right, moving on to Bitcoin here. Bitcoin has basically done nothing since the last few videos that we've made. This is why we're not really looking at it on a day-to-day basis. We're only looking at it on a week-to-week basis. So looking at what we talked about last week, it came down to retrace into that buy zone, bounced beautifully off that buy zone. So if any of you guys took some buys around that 15.5 to 16,000 area, you basically caught the bottom of that move. And if you're trading that range, you're looking to sell the middle of the range around 16.8 and then the high of the range around 17.5 to 18,000. You have already hit the middle of the range around that 16.8. So if we can start holding back above that, you want to look bullish, or you want to be bullish, into that 17.5, 18.1. The main problem that we're seeing here is it's putting in lower highs. So even during this accumulation, it is leaning slightly bearish. So if it can't get back above this mid zone around 16.8, you're possibly going to come back down and retrace that 15.5, possibly even sweeping that low into 15,000. Okay. Okay, moving on to Ethereum. We're actually in a weekly range on Ethereum, so we have to go up to even a higher time frame on Ethereum. But last week we did see a small bounce, just like Bitcoin, bouncing off that lower quadrant around 11,000. As long as you can maintain above 1160 to 1200, this does look slightly bullish back into the middle of the range, which would be around 1450 to 1400. If you can hold above 1400, look for that 1700, possibly 2000. Obviously, this is on a weekly time frame, so that's going to be pretty far out. So we'll talk about that in the next few summary markets. But as of right now, you are holding a pretty big buy zone down here in the 1100 to 1200 area. Okay. All right, moving on to the dollar. We actually had that on our other chart here. Let's go ahead and take a look at the dollar and the euro. We're going to hide our correlation table for now. We'll bring that back in a little bit. So starting off with the euro here, the dollar, we are actually coming back and retesting the 200 EMA almost to the absolute penny. So this little double bottom here is bouncing perfectly off this 200 EMA, which has not been tested since September of 2021. So this is definitely a major support you want to keep your eye on. If we can hold this level here, which it currently looks like it is, it has that beautiful bottom doji there. You do want to look for a bounce, possibly sweeping the high of this level right here, right around 108. If you can hold back above 108, you're looking for kind of this little distribution low around 109.50 to possibly around 111. But obviously, we have a ton of data prints this week. We've got a ton of Fed talks this week. All of that is going to dictate how the dollar moves here. So you can't be purely technical, but the technicals do look slightly bullish with that 200 EMA support. Moving on to the euro here, it's almost the exact opposite. You are pulling back into the 200 EMA as resistance. So you kind of have a double top here on the 200 EMA on the daily chart. So if the euro starts to fail this 200 EMA, Obviously, once again, keep an eye on those data prints. It's going to dictate how they move here. But if it does start failing that 200 EMA, it is possibly going to look for some liquidity, sweeping the low here around 102.2, and then possibly back down to the accumulation high, which we can see is somewhere around that area, which is around $1 even, which is a very big psychological number moving forward for the euro as well. So if we lose 102.2, look for that $1 even mark to see that support coming in. If the data prints that come out this week are leaning bullish, the obvious target would be a sweep of this high right here to grab that liquidity around 107. Obviously, that is very far away, and currencies don't move that quickly. So we're possibly not going to get that this week. You could look for the lower target, same exact kind of thesis, sweeping that high there on that little micro accumulation, possibly into 106. Now, before 106, there really is not a whole lot of things you can target, because the other thing that I would target here is the low around 103.5, which we have already broken. So we've hit that target. The only obvious targets above you would be that 106 to 107.8. Now, obviously, that would help you more to the downside if we do start to stay below that range low around 103.4, 103.5. You do want to look for that sweep of 102.2, and then, like we said, back down into $1 even. Okay. All right, last but not least, let's talk about oil here. So moving on to oil, actually, I need to go to my other chart. So oil is stuck back into this bearish channel. You tried to break out of it, failed that double top, and then just started nuking. So now we are in another bearish impulse. If you wanted to draw like something like a trend line, you could do something like that. I'm not a big fan of trend lines in that regard, but if you did want to look at that as more of a kind of a downward channel, you could. You are hitting a very massive support kind of around that 76 to 80 area, but it doesn't look like it's going to hold for long, because if I zoom in here, you can see we've already tested that support on this candle here on Monday the 21st, and it gave you a very strong bounce off of that level, but then it instantly sold off with, I think it was some OPEC news. But that level has already been used up, is my point. So most likely will not hold here for very long. It can come down to fill in this value zone, possibly down to 73. And then if we don't hold that, it's starting to look pretty bad, because then it would be breaking out of this downward channel and starting an even bigger bearish impulse to the downside. So definitely look for that support around 74 to 73. If you lose that, we're getting quite bearish on oil. If it can maintain back above that 78 to 79, do look for that sweep above 82. But you can't be bullish on oil long term really until it starts getting back above 93. So even if we start breaking this level here, this is still kind of a sell zone, because if we look at this as a accumulation, we can grab, like, say, a range. Let's say we take this as an accumulation range. We can see that that would be the upper quadrant, right? So even if we do start to bounce, you do want to be a bearish trader kind of around that 89 to 94 area, mid to long term. Now, obviously, long term, if we start to get back above that accumulation high, then we can start talking about those much farther out targets. But obviously, that's not going to be for this week. But all right, guys, that is it for the summary markets. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed this video. Like we said in the beginning, make sure to check out our Black Friday sales. They are going to be going on for a little bit longer. The Apex sale, I think, ends tomorrow. We're going to extend the OTG sale possibly into Wednesday or Friday. So definitely take a look at that. It should be the first and second link in the description below. So definitely have a look. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, and I will see you guys tomorrow for our live stream at 9:30 in the morning. Have a good rest of your weekend. See you later.